Welcome to the Dwelt Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Mitch Waite. I'm here with Chris Hardman and Dan Jensen, and this is episode 10 of the Dwelt Podcast. We're in double digits, fellas. We did it. I watched a video this week of Alex Hormozy, who said if you want to be in the top 1% of podcasts, all you got to get to is 19 episodes. So we're more than halfway there to be in one of the top 1% of podcasts. So stoked. That is if the world doesn't end before we get the next 9 podcasts out. We have so much. I was just telling these guys before we started, we have so much going on in the world today that I don't even know where to start. We have a whole list of topics. And so we were going through the topics earlier on. And I think one of us mentioned nothing ever happens. And so we're gonna kick off today's episode with a little bit of sentiment about nothing ever happens. So Chris, you've been back and forth on the nothing ever happens camp for quite a while. Why is that?
Well, something has to happen eventually. I used to think that something has to happen with how chaotic the world is and all of the things that can go wrong. But over time, it seems like no matter what is going on in the world, the end result is nothing happens. It's just like over and over and over again. It can't be sustained. Something has to happen at some point, but it's sure interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of the scripture about flaxen cords becoming chains, where Satan binds you with his ties you with his flaxen cords until he can bind you with unbreakable chains. And I think that's just part of his model. Like, he's not going to come out and do something major. He's going to just, death by a million paper cuts or whatever that euphemism is. It's like he's eroded our personal liberties. He's eroded property rights. He's eroded morals and beliefs. He's eroded the education system. And it's just like this constant, just not even a bombardment. It's like constant chipping away at the fabric and foundation of society until we get to where we are now.
It reminds me of a story from early church history. I don't remember who it was that was involved, but someone, I think they're talking to Joseph, and they're telling him a story about how they basically they went up to pray or something in somewhere. I obviously don't know the details very well, but they went up to pray and the veil was lifted and they saw demons basically attacking them. And he says he's blessed, like God blessed me because he just made it was humorous. Like, it was almost funny, and they laughed at him and the demons went away. And he tells the story, and I'm pretty sure it's Joseph is like, well, then that means, like, if Satan's revealing himself to you in that way, it's like a last ditch effort, because that's not what he wants to do. He wants to slowly deceive you over time and lead you down to hell that way. And if he's revealing himself, it's because everything else has not worked. And so it's like one final ditch effort to get you. And so I think that kind of plays into what you're saying, is he would prefer a slow death.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, speaking of slow death, we have a now famous 4chan post from like 4 years ago. You want to pull that up on the screen?
Yeah, let me pull it up here. So here we are. This is from 2013.
Oh,
so this is really
11
old.
years ago.
Yeah. Prophetic, though. Do you want me to just read it? Okay. It's a little long. Bear with me. There will be no collapse the way some of these people think of it. It's not going to be like the movie Dawn of the Dead or whatever, where one day suddenly everything hits the fan and prices skyrocket and everyone begins to riot and the SS comes marching down the street to kill everyone. There will be no happening. It's far more insidious than that. Read the poem The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot and you'll understand. You'll just notice that every day simple things will become a little more expensive. Everyone's homes and apartments will start to get smaller. Your work hours will get longer, but your pay will decrease. You'll see family and friends less, and find that in time you care less about them. Every day you'll find yourself lowering your standards for everything: work, food, relationships, etc. Job security will no longer exist as a concept. You'll notice houses and apartments shrinking. People will start hanging on to clothing longer and longer. Less people will get married, even less will have children. People will engross themselves in technological distractions and fantasy, which will never truly, or while never truly experiencing the real world. Whatever dream people used to have about what their lives were going to be will become, for them, a distant memory. The only thing left for them will be the reality of their debt and their poverty. And every minute of every day they will be told, "You are stupid, ugly, and weak, but together we are free, prosperous, and safe." That is the collapse, the reduction of the American man into a feudal serf, incapable of feeling love or hate, incapable of seeing the pitiful nature of his situation for what it is or recognizing his own self-worth.
That's
So
crazy.
that's wild. I've mentioned
11
this before.
years ago, man. He nailed it.
Yeah, he did.
Man.
Well, I mentioned this before on the podcast. I remember seeing the bread lines in Soviet Russia at the collapse of the USSR. It was all over the news. I was in grade school, but for some reason it just blew my mind that people would have to wait in line for bread. I'm like, my mom makes bread all the time. Just have your mom make some bread. You know, my little mind couldn't fathom why people would need to line up for bread. But I was just watching a video from one of my classmates from junior high and high school, Phil. He's a pharmacist. If you watch him on TikTok or Instagram, it's under Phil is my pharmacist. And he was talking about the supply chain for medications and how we only produce, it's like we used to only produce 7% of the active ingredients that we need annually here in the US. And so we have to import from everywhere else. And so during the children's ibuprofen shortage from a couple of years ago, Congress got in touch with the FDA and said, what is going on? You got to fix this. We need more. And so Phil reports that now instead of 7% production of active ingredients, we're down to 3% production of active ingredients. So it got worse. And part of the problem is that FDA bureaucracy has limited the number of factories and suppliers that can actually make money meeting their standards or whatever it is. And so they're simply just not producing it. And so any medications that you rely on, he said something like 1 in 70 elderly people just don't get any medicine like that they need. So if you're a diabetic and you need insulin, if you're one of those 70, 1 out of every 70 people just doesn't get it because it's not available and has to suffer the consequences. And that goes through, like, that's the average of all medications. So, I mean, we saw it with toilet paper. We saw it with children's ibuprofen. We see it just over and over again, one thing or another, where, you know, infrastructure is breaking down, supply chains are not available, manufacturing isn't available, importing is problematic. I mean, it's just one thing right after the other. And we're in the thick of it right now. I mean, we're experiencing it. It's kind of crazy.
So it's not that nothing ever happens. It's just that it's always happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always happening slowly.
You'll never realize that this is happening. That's what it really is.
But what really happens then is you have this slow decay of everything. And at some point, it can't take the pressure of society and the weight of holding everything anymore. And then it does. Everything's fast after that.
Yeah. There's a tipping point at some point. Like, and what's crazy is to be a Gen Xer and to witness all of it. Like when I was a kid in my neighborhood, like in my class at school, there were maybe 1 or 2 kids max whose parents were divorced. And now it's like half the kids in the class, their parents are divorced. Same thing with moms working. Dude, you know, my generation is when the latchkey kids started. Like I remember kids showing up with a house key chained around their neck on a necklace so that they could get into the house after school because their mom would still be at work. Right. And so that started with my generation. And now it's like everybody has to have a 2-parent household working in order to pay the bills. It's just like it's almost impossible to survive in middle-class America without both parents working. And if you are a single parent, the number of single parents who have moved back in or are moving back into their boomer parents or their Gen X parents. I mean, it's through the roof. And then we get down to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and it's like, what's a 2-parent family? Like, what is that? Does that even exist? And so in my lifetime, just one generation, we went from, nuclear family, middle class, the one income from the dad could pay for the home and 2 cars. And heck, we had a boat. It wasn't the nicest boat, but we had a boat. And, nobody can afford a boat these days. So we're seeing it. It's taken so long to get to this point that we don't even realize it. We're swimming in it and we don't even realize it.
It makes sense because, sorry, Dan, you go ahead.
I was just going to say this line that stands out to me in this quote is, "You are stupid, ugly, and weak, but together we are free, prosperous, and safe." And I instantly thought of Instagram and all the other social platforms because my wife will get on there and just see things and get discouraged, right? And kind of feel frustrated. But then it looks like we're free, prosperous, and safe because all these influencers are promoting all this amazing stuff that they're doing. But then you play the comparison game, right, in your mind. And it's like, well, why am I not in Hawaii right now? Why am I not at Disneyland with my 6 kids or whatever, Yeah. And so it's interesting. That quote just stood out to me.
Things must not be that bad if my friends are going to Hawaii.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then when it comes down to it, you try to plan the trip and you go, oh, that'll be $6,000. So,
yeah.
So then you're like, how do I make this happen? Right.
And
so
plane
then you
might
get caught up
on
in
the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. The door of my plane's just going to blow off.
I don't want to mention any airline companies in case I get killed after this episode. But hopefully you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy times. What were you going to say about it, Chris?
I was going to say it makes sense because that from like a spiritual perspective that Satan would want it to be slow, because if something big happens suddenly, it kind of it shakes people and wakes them up and forces them one direction or another. And usually I would like to think that they're going to get closer to God in those scenarios, whatever that means to them. But if he can do it slowly, then he's just like lulling you asleep while he completely destroys society and morals and everything. And you're too like distracted and tired to notice or to do anything to stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember in high school, you had to read a classic novel, and 2 of the classic novels on the list were Fahrenheit 451 and A Brave New World. And I read A Brave New World, and one of my friends read Fahrenheit 451, and they're basically opposites accomplishing the same thing. So Fahrenheit 451 is like, hey, let's observe everything, let's record everything, let's censor everything, let's shut everything down to control the people. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is A Brave New World, where it's let's give everybody pleasure and focus on entertainment and fun, and that's how we will control the world. And the interesting thing as I get older, I see that both of those things are happening. Like Dan, you were talking about Instagram, and I mean, for years now, we've been scrolling through Instagram, looking at the most beautiful of beautiful, the most entertaining of entertaining, and it's easy to ignore what's right in front of us all the time when we're looking at that. At the same time, I mean, I remember the pitch that George W. Bush gave for the Patriot Act. Terrorists have invaded the U.S. Like thousands of Americans have died. We need to monitor every cell phone call that there is. And then shortly after that, things like texting become popular, email becomes popular, and the conversation is, well, we haven't been attacked by terrorists since the Patriot Act. So, of course, we're going to monitor these communications as well. And then we have a whole generation that's grown up that doesn't know anything other than constant surveillance and constant censorship. And we go into this time of COVID, and people are being canceled. They're being locked out of different applications and different accounts because they have a certain perspective that, the great joke is the conspiracy theorists were right all along, where now we see that the FDA backs down, the CDC backs down on their claims about ivermectin. You don't want to take horse paste, and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like mind-boggling that we're in this situation where, yeah, we are censored and we are force-fed pleasure so that we don't care. We're fine. It's great. No big deal.
I don't know about Orwell, but Huxley ran in the circles too. He knew what was coming.
Oh, I'm sure Orwell did as well. I mean,
Yeah. Huxley had quite the connections.
Yeah. This is the skeptic in me, but I'm like, you don't get to be at the top of the food chain without making the agreements and going to the parties and all of that kind of stuff. And what's crazy to me is when I would say that back in 2008 or 2003, people would look at me like, what are you talking about? But now I can run into somebody at the grocery store and be like, the price of bananas is through the roof. It's because of the Gadianton robbers. And people are like, yep, that's it. I may not use the term Gadianton robbers, but like, this is a great conspiracy. They're after us. And people are like, yeah, man, let's take them out or whatever. Yep. It's pretty wild.
What do you guys think about this perspective? I was watching, I saw a TikTok video scrolling the other day, and it was interesting because this guy talked about COVID and 2020 and how things have been going the last several years since. And his point of view is that there's a lot of us that are feeling a little numb and like almost out of body, or like tripping out a little about like just life in general. And some of his take was just that we're so distracted by our phones and by social media and everything that we're getting that dopamine hit constantly. And we're all addicted. And then we start getting major withdrawals anytime we try to break away and go on a trip or go off hiking or, go into nature. We have a hard time keeping the phone off because we're like craving that hit again. And it just keeps us in this cycle of numbness, which I think this quote kind of points out as well. What do you think about that?
I mean, I agree. I always say you have the people who are like, the government can never take our guns. Like, people won't give them up. And I'm like, as long as people can go home and like they're not starving and they can turn on their Netflix show, you'll be surprised what they'll do, like, to keep that comfort. They're not looking to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. There are a few things that I want to share about this, because on one hand, it is definitely the model of Satan and his followers to do this kind of stuff, to trick us into this kind of stuff. And I sent an email. This is kind of crazy. I sent an email in, it was November 11th, 2018 to a handful of my friends. I'm actually going to share that. I didn't think I'd share it, but this is like the one thing that I got right, and I just nailed it. And so I'm pretty proud of it, but I shouldn't be. Before I go to there, let me share my screen real quick. Let's see. So this is, here we go. Okay. This is one of the scriptures that we were talking about. So he says, for behold, at that day shall he rage in the hearts of the children of men and stir them up to anger against that which is good. And others he will pacify and lull them away into carnal security, that they will say, all is well in Zion. Yea, Zion prospereth, all is well. And thus the devil cheateth their souls and lead them away carefully down to hell. That's 2 Nephi 28:21. 22. And behold, others he flattereth away and telleth them there is no hell, and saith unto them, I am no devil, for there is none. And thus he whispereth in their ears until he grasps them with his awful chains, from whence there is no relief or no deliverance. So yeah, I think absolutely the feeling that we're feeling right now is one that we've been lulled away into. And it's either one of flattery, like, oh, there's no sin. Like, we'll just do whatever we want. There's no consequences for society. Like, let's implement chemical birth control, which is, a very scary topic. Or let's make, free abortions the standard, and there's no consequences. Well, now fast forward 30 years and we're like, wait, there are major consequences. We've had almost we've had almost an entire race extinguished because of abortion with African Americans. I mean, tens of millions of them aborted. Think of how the world would be different if we had all of those souls here. Others, so that's the flattering away. Others are pacifying. He pacifies away. So it's like, hey, no, we're good. Everything's okay. We're all right. Nothing ever happens, right? And then the other one is that some will be stirred up to anger against that which is good. And actually, some of the scriptures that some of the people, some of our followers commented and said, hey, I want you to comment on this. I posted a thread yesterday on Twitter that was a pretty long thread. And the crux of it is, it was because of that anger that caused the more righteous group of people to fall away from the truth back in the days of 3rd Nephi. So we'll hop into that here in a little bit, but I want to switch over. Let me read this email. Let's see here. I'll switch my screen over. So I sent out this email. This the one that you're seeing here is to my wife. That's Beth right there. Okay, take a look at this talk in 1953 by President McKay, especially the 2 obligations members of the church have. And so I link to the talk. I say, he talks a lot about procreation and the importance of rearing children. For example, and I quote from the talk, any social system which prevents the individual from pursuing the normal cycle of life, from marrying young to rearing a family before the age of 50 or so, and from obtaining the deep, peculiar joys of middle life and grandparenthood, defeats the divine order of the universe and lays the basis of all sorts of social problems. So this is in 1953. And then he goes on to say, another deterrent to happiness in the home is the refusal to bear full responsibility of motherhood and fatherhood. And then he narrows his quote to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this is, again, 1953. So this is a different era. But check out the council. It says, members of the church who are healthy and normal should not be guilty of restricting the number of children in the home, especially when such action is promoted by a desire for a good time, or for personal gain, or to keep up with the neighbors, or by a false impression that 1 or 2 children in a family can be better educated. These are excuses which members of the church should not harbor, for they are unjustified. So I read this and I was like, okay, 1953, what happened 20 years later? 20 years later, the Supreme Court legalized abortion via Roe v. Wade. And then I go on to say, this reminds me of The Family, a proclamation to the world, being given in 1995. And then 20 years later, the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage via Obergefell versus Hodges. And then I go on to say, the next proclamation, the Living Christ, the Testimony of the Apostles, was given in the year 2000. What will the Supreme Court legalize in 2020? The persecution of Christians? Will they declare an end to freedom of religion? And that's the end of my email. And what happened in 2020? We had churches shut down, temples shut down, missionaries brought home. And I'm like, okay, we have these 20-year warnings that we're given well in advance to prepare us for calamities or even just social changes of the times ahead. But going back to the original quote in there from David O. McKay, any social system that disrupts the normal progress of life lays the basis for all sorts of social problems, is what he said. And here we are in the midst of that, seeing the consequences of that kind of behavior. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. We've hit one topic out of the 40 we have listed, and we're half an hour in.
All right, so let's talk.
Hope you guys are ready.
We can answer some questions. There are a couple of things that have happened this week that I think are of tremendous importance. Chris, you've got the list. I've got a list in front of me. A couple of them, the death of the head of Iran. That's a big one. The FBI authorizing lethal force against Trump in the Mar-a-Lago raid. We've got people talking about China invading Taiwan in early June. There's talk of Israel invading Lebanon before the end of the month. EPA warns of cyber attacks against water utilities. There's a failed coup in Congo that involved a young man from Utah who's now dead from his failed attempt. There's some legal stuff going on that is impacting freedom of religion and the ability of churches to operate. I want to share some of that. Ashley Biden confirmed that the journal that was leaked that talked about abuse, her being abused or allegations of her being abused, she says, yep, that's my journal. Yeah, there's and then we've got a ton of follower questions. And then you've got, there's probably a few on your list, Chris, that I didn't hit on.
Yeah, most of it. We got a lot.
All right. What should we talk about? The big one. Let's talk about the Iranian president.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So you were the one that let me know that it happened. So you want to give us the quick rundown of what happened in the event?
Yeah. So short story is the Iranian president was flying in a helicopter somewhere in Iran. I believe it was like the foreign minister of foreign affairs. I don't know. It's like I think it's like his I can't talk. Secretary of Defense. I think it's the same kind of thing.
Okay.
Was also in the helicopter with him, and they crashed due to fog. Is the story? It took 12 hours for search and rescue to find him. Some of the rescuers got lost themselves trying to find him. I don't know if they were ever found. I assume they were, but anyways, yeah, Iranian president died in a helicopter crash. They're going to hold an election.
You made a comment.
June.
You made a comment about helicopter crashes. What was your comment?
I want to say it was Trump who said this, but I don't know for sure. But he said helicopter accidents are rarely accidents.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for planes too, though. I know Trump will only fly on whatever his plane is called because he doesn't trust that it's safe to fly on any other plane other than the one that your own people are maintaining.
Yeah, and it's funny because his plane is a Boeing 737 that he converted into a private jet. And so, a lot of conspiracy theorists are saying, oh, this is why these whistleblowers are getting killed. And all of this news is going around about Boeing's maintenance issues and production issues and stuff like that. So they can lay the stage for a potential attempt against Trump via plane crash, right? I got to go on a helicopter ride just a couple of weeks ago. My good friend Cameron owns a helicopter. If you watch Skinwalker Ranch on History Channel, maybe Discovery, I don't know, History Channel, I think, the black helicopter that flies out to the ranch and back, that belongs to my buddies Cameron and Brandon. And I got to go up in a flight in Cameron's helicopter, and he was like, "Yeah, if the weather's clear, we'll go for a flight." And so we went up there, and the weather was clear. It was a little bit windy, and we took off. And as we're flying around, it's amazing to fly around in a helicopter, right? You can shoot straight up, go sideways, turn around. We flew over Squaw Peak in Provo and dropped down the face of the mountain, and it was a huge rush. We flew up and over Pleasant Grove in the mountains to where we used to hike around when we were kids and stuff. It was pretty cool. But he was talking about the aerodynamics of a helicopter and how even when you lose power, you can power rotate to the ground and land safely. I don't know if you've seen the movie San Andreas, where the Rock is flying the helicopter and the power goes out and he floats it down, and they power down to the ground and they walk away from a crashed helicopter. And so Cameron was walking me through the aerodynamics of that. And I think you're right, Chris. I'm not an aviation expert, but very uncommon for a helicopter to just fall out of the sky like that. Now, whether it was cloudy and they flew into a mountain or some trees, I don't know. But let's talk about the implications.
Let's also just mention the weather data disappeared, which is kind of weird.
Oh, yeah. So the historical weather data for the area disappeared. So
can't find it on any weather website or anything that keeps track of that kind of information. It's just gone.
Yeah. Pretty strange. So a couple of things just generally. Have you heard the term BRICS, the BRICS nations? I mean, I know you have, Chris. Dan, are you familiar with the BRICS nations?
I'm not.
So a bunch of nations got together and said, we're tired of using the dollar, the US dollar, to transact in oil. And so BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, Iran, I think, China, and somewhere that starts with an S. Saudi Arabia. I don't know where it was. We could probably Google it real quick. But they got together and they said, hey, instead of exchanging via the petrodollar, let's come up with our own currency and we'll transact that way. And all of that, I think, is supposed to go live like June 1st. And so
I have the countries if you want them.
Yeah, well, now it's way beyond BRICS. It's like a whole bunch of countries. Yeah, what are they?
But it starts out with the BRICS spelling. So it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then so those were the original ones. And now you have Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates. And I believe Saudi Arabia is talking to them.
Yeah, and the conversation is that they're going to do it based on the gold standard. And if we peel back the onion yet another layer, what's happening with the price of gold right now? It's skyrocketed, right? Record heights on gold. And so the speculation is that you have all of these nations looking to transact their oil in a gold-backed currency that is independent of the US dollar. And the last time I remember seeing a country stand up and say, we're going to go back to the gold standard, it was Libya under Gaddafi. And let's see, what country is Gaddafi president over right now?
I don't know. Hell. whatever country.
Yeah, he was taken out
He's
in
dead.
Arab Spring, right? Where the people stood up and took out their leaders.
And before that, the last one who wanted to go to a gold standard was Saddam Hussein.
Yep. Yeah. And there actually was a U.S. president that said, hey, let's go to a metal-backed currency. And he converted the currency from a private bank into the government bank and did it backed by silver. And he's no longer with us as well. This is JFK. And this goes back to the temple shekel. I mean, every time I think about hard currency like that, I think of the temple shekel. So the temple shekel, and I'll probably get banned. This episode will be banned because of this commentary right here. But the idea was in Rome, you transacted in Roman coinage, right? And when the people of Israel had their temple that Herod built up, they said, well, it's against the law to transact in Herod's gold and Herod's coinage, so we need to come up with our own. And so they created an exchange rate, and that exchange rate depended upon the price of the Roman coinage coming in, converting it into a temple shekel, and then using a temple shekel to be able to buy the animals that were used in sacrifice in that temple. And so when Christ cleansed the temple, that's the system he was putting down. He was going in and saying, hey, you guys, money changers, right? So they're changing Roman coinage into Pharisaical coinage. And he's like, you can't exchange this in my Father's house. And he cleanses that and kicks them out, and that was on Tuesday. And by Friday, he was dead. Like that was one of the last things that he did before they took him out. So you get this repeated theme over and over and over again. It goes back to the Watchers podcast Chris and Leland were doing, where just throughout time, over and over and over again, you see these repeated consequences, events, themes that just happen over and over again, and they're not good for us at all. So that's one angle for the issues with the Iranian president. The other angle is there's two kind of factions. Well, there's more than two, but the two primary factions within Islam are the Shia and the Sunni. You guys have heard this, right? There's the Shias and the Sunnis, and in Iraq, there was always battles going back and forth between the Shias and the Sunnis. Well, you got two countries that are primarily Shia, and that is Iran and Iraq. They're Shia. And you can think of the Shia, they are the ones that believe in authoritarian structure and the power of the lineage all the way back to Muhammad, and then and so they're very, I guess you would say they're very orthodox, right? They're very firm in the way that they live. They rely on the words of the prophets and things like that. And then you've got the Sunni, and the Sunni are less focused on authoritarianism. They're more focused on the translation of the scriptures and consensus by scholars. And so you can have Sunnis who are more casual, I guess, in their observance of Islam. And there's constant pressure and tension between those two groups. And so you've got Iran and Iraq on the Shia side, and all those other countries that are primarily Sunni. And within Iran and within Iraq, there's also tension between the two factions. And so the question is, are the Sunnis in Iran strong enough at this point that now that a leader is taken out, there was also a cleric, not a cleric, I guess you'd call it a cleric, on the helicopter that died, one of the main clerics. And so are the Sunnis in Iran strong enough to rise up and say, okay, we're down, we're taking down the Shia and we're going to take over the government? And that's kind of what everybody's watching right now. And if 3-letter agencies are involved with this death, then the question is, was this orchestrated in order to tip Iran favorable? And then that favorable tip opens up exchange via the dollar instead of BRICS currency, and allows a new source for oil, a new source for drugs, all of that kind of stuff. And so people are always, talking about the glory days of Iran back in the 70s before the Shia took over. And, you got women in mini skirts and going to university, and now they're all wearing, religious clothing and can't go out of the house or whatever that is. That's kind of what everybody is watching for. And then there's also the assumption that Iran is close to getting nuclear weapons, if you believe in those. And so if they can swing the government to more pro-Western government, then that gives us another foothold in the region. So pretty large implications, multiple layers of speculation and potential conspiracy. But the end result, I think immediately we saw gas prices spike up, and we're going into the summer when gas prices normally spike up. And so, we will probably see a hit on our economy because of this. Fuel companies are going to jump on it and say, hey, there's unrest over there, we're going to charge more. It's just kind of bonkers.
One thing you can at least guarantee from this is that every intelligence agency in the world is going to be trying to influence what happens next in that country.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So one of the videos that I put out this week was go get 5 gallons of gas. Don't store it in your house or in your garage, store it in the backyard or whatever, but go get 5 gallons of gas, because number one, it'll be a good investment because that gas will be 20% more expensive 2 months from now. But number two, it gives you the option to get out of Dodge if fuel supplies are cut off.
But Biden's releasing 1 million barrels of oil. It's totally
from
fine.
From our strategic reserves.
Yeah, it's totally
that's
fine.
a good idea.
Just drain the reserves.
So you said I should not be storing gas in my garage.
I wouldn't. I never have.
Safety issue? Is that what you're thinking?
You've got 2 safety issues. One is fumes, right? Because those fumes can't escape, and so that creates, volatile fumes and gas in your garage. And then the other one is just ignition, right? Any situation where it spills over, or I don't know. I watched a video. My son showed me a video of one of his friends who was, I don't know, doing something mechanical. I think he was changing the oil in his lawnmower, and he had a metal pan, and he poured all of the oil into a little recycling thing, but the pan still had oil in it. And he was like, I'm going to see if this ignites. And it must've been like an oil gas mix or something, but he ignited it, and the thing just went bigger and bigger and bigger. And he had to go in and get a fire extinguisher and extinguish it. Man. And it was right next to one of the cars. So like the car was ready to catch on fire. But those types of things happen. You've got, teenagers and kids around the house that could do that kind of stuff. So I would recommend storing it outside, somewhere in the backyard, something like that. And communicate to all the kids, hey, leave that thing alone. It's super dangerous.
Well, now I got to rethink this because I have like 20 gallons sitting in the garage, but it's all sealed up. But I don't have a backyard that's fenced off, right? I'm in like an HOA.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where I could put it. I think it would be less safe out in the back.
Yeah.
So now you got me thinking what to do. Anyway, I'm just asking because there's probably other people that are doing the same thing. I thought I was good that I at least got the gas, but now maybe I need to get a shed or something and store it out in that.
Yeah. Wouldn't hurt. Cool. I've always stored it outside because of the risks of having it in the house. I mean, you don't want to burn down your house and your neighbors' houses. But good job having fuel on hand. Smart move.
Yeah. That reminds me, I do have some water stored up as well, which I know you did another post about that, getting your 5 gallons of water. And I wanted to ask you your take on this. I've got probably a 50-gallon drum in the garage that I filled up like 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm thinking I probably should switch it out, right? Like it's sealed up, it's dark, it's, but I'm kind of sitting here thinking, gosh, maybe I need to go tip it over, refill it with the way you suggested.
So a couple of thoughts on that. We've stored up water for years, and so I did the same thing. I got a 50-gallon barrel. Well, I got 5 50-gallon barrels. I filled them up with water, had them down in the basement, and I wanted to do a test. So one I treated with chlorine and the other one I didn't. And a year later, I opened them up, pumped some of the water out and tasted the two. The one without chlorine tasted great. There was no like mold or any buildup. It was fine. There was no issues with it whatsoever. The one that had chlorine in it, I could barely drink it, even though we treated it with the smallest amount, like the prescribed amount, whatever it is. It's like a teaspoon per 50 gallons or something crazy like that. It was hard to drink because it tasted so strongly. So I ended up dumping all of that stuff out and refilling the barrels with regular water. And every year I'd go check them. We were in that house for 9 years. And the one that I filled up first that I didn't put chlorine in was still fine after 9 years. Now we live in Utah where it's pretty dry. I had them stored in the basement where the temperature is pretty consistent. It was always dark in that room. So maybe, it's different here in Utah. But that's kind of how I managed it to make sure that, I didn't have rancid water or bad water, and I didn't have to cycle it out all the time. It's pretty easy.
Sweet. That's good. I'll go check it. I'll test it. I have not done that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Chris, where are we going next? Should we answer some questions?
Sure. Let's answer some questions, and then I have some stuff we can get into.
Oh, well, do you want to let's get into your stuff.
Let's do questions first.
All right. We'll do questions.
Let's give the people what they want.
With a little suspense too.
Yeah. I'm just going to go through this list then, and we can just knock them off. Okay. So first question, what's an uncommon tool that everybody should have?
Oh man. Most tools are pretty common, and it depends on your living situation. But I will tell you this. Living on a farm and on a homestead, I always, and you guys have seen this, I always carry with me all the time, wherever I go, whether I'm in church or whether I'm at the office or whatever, I always carry a Leatherman. And I've had 6 or 7 different models of Leatherman. The one that I really like, I think it's out of production anymore, is called the Wingman. I think you can still get them on Amazon. But the reason I like this one is, so it's got the pliers, right, which I use all the time. So if you're in any type of scenario where you're going to have to be fixing stuff, like fixing fence or putting stuff back together, you want something that's got screwdrivers in it, that's got pliers in it. This one's got a little flip out blade that's on there. I don't like the serrated blade, so I usually sharpen that down to where it's just smooth. And then on the other side, it's got the scissors on it, and they're both lock blades, so they go out and they lock. It's got a little file on there, but I kid you not, I use this thing every single day on the homestead. And so it is quite common to carry around a multi-tool. I can't remember the price on these. It may be like $50. It may even be like $70 these days with all the shortages and stuff. But I would say get one, use it, carry it with you, either put it on your belt and pretend you're, Bo Duke with your knife on your belt, or throw it in your bag. But you should definitely have one on you all the time. I use it all the time. I was talking to one of my friends that lives off grid yesterday, and we're comparing knives and flashlights and everyday carry stuff. And he's like, yeah, I always carry the Leatherman and I use it every single day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I just saw a list of 10 tech gadgets that are for sale on Amazon that are illegal. So I'll link that in the show notes. You guys can get like cell phone
Like a
jammers
flipper?
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get one of those flippers for a while. And then I'm like,
Just for
where would I
research
actually
purposes.
use that?
Yeah. Not to actually use.
Yeah. I will say this. So we got a wood burning stove 2 years ago. And so I get the wood delivered and it's split and delivered. Like I didn't have time to chop it. But when I go out and chop the kindling up to get the fire started, I've gone through like 4 different types of axes. And so I'll tweet out a link to the axe that I have that I love and use and that works so well. I've split a few axe handles. Some of them look really tough, but don't split wood. And this one is like easy to hold, easy to carry. Like you could throw it in a pack and do bushcrafting with it. That's another tool that I think is really important. We kind of joked about this on the, on our Dwelt meeting just yesterday. One thing that I think everybody should get is a good water filter. And I kind of teased you guys and made some of you feel bad, but every once in a while, okay, I'll tell you what not to do. Well, you can do this if it's like super cheap and on sale and easy and you just want to grab it. But I see so many people posting about life straws. Like they get the life straw because they're what, like $12 or something like that, and easy to carry around, and then you can just stick your face down in the water and suck through it, and it filters it as you suck through it. If you don't have anything else, you can get one of those. But if you've ever tried to use a life straw, not easy. Like, yeah, if you're backpacking and you come across a stream and you just want to get a drink, that's cool. You can do that. But if you have to boil water to prepare food or boil water to treat it or something like that, I mean, or any large quantity of water for washing a wound or anything like that, you're not going to want to suck it up, spit it out, because that defeats the purpose. So I really like the MSR. It's a little hand pump. It's got a tube that you put in the water, and then you can connect the other end of it to a water bottle or just whatever. I carry a water filter with me just about wherever I go. I have one in my bag in the car. And then I recently flew to Texas and I took my water filter with me because I'm like, well, that's the first thing that I need to take care of outside of, making sure that I'm not going to die from exposure. So a water filter is the next thing. So Leatherman, water filter, and a good axe.
Love it. Is the MSR, is that the brand of filter? And is it like a pump, the pump kind where you put the hose in a stream or something or a lake and pump it?
Pump it through.
Sweet.
I like that one because like I have had an MSR, the same model. MSR's made the same model. It's a little tiny one. It's like that big, and it has the pump on there that you can pump. But they offer replacement filters. So I've had the same thing for probably 20 years. And then I just get a new replacement filter for it. So it's a little bit more expensive, but it lasts forever. There are new gravity fed ones where you fill up a bag and you hang it up and then it drips through. That's great if you want to save, or you want to filter a whole bunch just via gravity. But man, those little MSRs are tried and true. Like I said, I've used it for 20 years, pretty much every summer, a few times. I'd get one of those and keep it with you.
Sweet.
Cool. So this goes into some other questions pretty naturally. You mentioned traveling to San Antonio. One question was, how do you prepare to deal with emergencies when traveling far from home?
Okay, so you guys know this. For I don't know, 6 months, 4 months, I was traveling once a week or once every other week out to California, just a quick flight overnight and then back. And so I thought about this a lot because I thought, man, if there's an electromagnetic pulse and the power goes down, I'm going to have to walk home. And walking home from from California to Utah would be tough because you got to cross the Mojave Desert, go through Vegas, and then so I thought through that quite a bit. A number of things, and there's actually books that go through. My wife just finished a book series of a woman who was stranded far away from home, hundreds of miles. I think when you're in that type of situation, when you're traveling on your own, you look at the basics. So I made sure that I always traveled in good shoes. And you can wear like running shoes. I always traveled in boots, and you guys know this. I always wear boots because I'm like, well, I need something with a strong sole and with toe and heel protection. So I generally wear boots pretty much everywhere I go. I always make sure I pack some necessities with me. I pack my water filter. I pack a ferrocerium rod. You can't pack a knife
on
a
rod?
trip like that. Ferrocerium rod. It's one of those that you create sparks with it to light a fire. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I'll usually throw in 2 or 3 Bic lighters as well. So ferrocerium rod, Bic lighters. Sometimes I throw in a tarp. I have these little tarps that fold up like this, little nylon tarps.
What does TSA think of you?
I don't know.
So
I'm going to make a bomb
that
on the plane. What's he doing?
Yeah. I got to ask, what did you do with your Leatherman? Because I went to the airport once, totally forgot, and had one on my keychain and had to ditch it there. And I was so annoyed.
Yeah.
So,
I never take I never take a knife. And so I travel without a blade. Right. And so my first thought is, in any situation, I'm like, okay, where can I find a blade? And if I have to start off with a butter knife that I sharpen on the pavement, I'll do that. I mean, you can get a blade pretty much anywhere. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'd pick up a pair of pliers and a blade wherever I went if I needed to. But you want to make sure, because again, the first thing that's going to kill you is exposure. And the second thing that's going to kill you is dehydration. And so I make sure, if I'm traveling in the winter, I have a good down jacket with me and then something waterproof. If I travel in the summer, I always make sure I have a good hat with me because my hairdo. But I'll make sure that I have something that will cover my head. And I often will throw in an empty water bottle. Now, some places you can't travel with water. Like I flew out of Santiago, Chile once, and they're like, you have to actually dump the water out of your water bottle. So I did that and carried just the empty water bottle. You always want to have a container with you. You always want to have cordage with you. And then if you have some cordage with you, a little bit of paracord, you can fashion bandages out of a torn shirt or something like that. But if I have exposure taken care of and water taken care of, I'm pretty good, and the ability to walk. So, and then I also either downloaded maps or knew the route. From here to California is super easy. I've done that a million times, so I know the route. But with Texas, I actually threw in a compass, because you get into those forests in Texas, you can't see anything. You can't see the direction you're going. So I'm like, I'm going to throw a little compass in there. And you can get a little tiny compass, will work anywhere, right? And then beyond that,
Until the poles shift.
Yeah, until the poles shift. That's right.
Which
is coming soon, right?
You traveled somewhere, and the whole reason you're now in an emergency situation is poles shifted. And now what are you going to do?
Yeah, for now, you get the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, so you can always rely on that, and then the North Star for now, until the heavens roll up like a scroll, and none of that is orientated right. The other thing that I do is I've set expectations with my family. Like, okay, if I'm gone and an EMP happens, I'm going to start heading home. If I die on my way home, that sucks. That's too bad. But my whole objective is to get home. I'm kind of probably weird that way because I think that way. I think a lot of people would be like, okay, this is my home now. This is where I live. I'm going to start over. But for me, I'd I'd just start walking. Well, I'd procure a bicycle and then ride it
Yeah,
until I had to walk.
I remember being in Mexico. I can't remember what was happening, but something was happening. There was like, and obviously nothing happened, of course. But at the time, there was something in the news, and I was talking to you, and you were like, "You're gonna have to set up your like warlord community down in Mexico."
That's right. That's
But I was
right.
the same way. I'm like, no, I need to get home. I need to figure out how to get back to Utah.
That's right. Yeah, that is a good question. The other thing is basic first aid stuff. So I actually throw a pouch in my my little shaving kit that's got, some ibuprofen, some Band-Aids, some triple antibiotic ointment, some consecrated oil, some stomach stuff. So I like activated charcoal or sodium bicarbonate. What's that called?
Baking soda?
Not baking soda. What is it called? Like Tums type stuff. That'll settle your stomach.
Tums, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And then allergy. I throw in a couple of Benadryls. And I figure with pain management, allergy management, stomach, I have some burn cream in there. That's about it.
I'm just going to say sodium bicarbonate is baking soda. And if you use it for stomach, like next time you have a stomach thing, do like a half tablespoon, I don't know, look it up. I don't want to mess up the dosage, but it's like a teaspoon or a half teaspoon or something of baking soda, and it will work way better than any of the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's what Tums is made out of, right? But it's also got all the extra crap in there.
Yeah.
So I throw a little kit, and that's like a Ziploc bag, right? You can keep a ton of stuff in a Ziploc bag, throw that in there, and I'm good to go.
Okay, well, I think that you kind of just hit on two other questions, so I'll read them to see if I have anything else to add.
Okay.
But one of them was, what are must-haves for a first aid kit? I think you just listed that.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I would throw a tourniquet in.
Yeah, I want to talk to that one a little bit because I did see that one, and we got to do shout outs for the people who sent these in. So the one was it Joe or something like that walking 800 miles away or whatever it is.
I'm not gonna lie, I wrote
Jim
down all
Rowland.
the questions on a doc and did not put anybody's name.
Okay, no.
So in the future, I will do that.
Yeah, the traveling far from home one was Jim Rowland. Kiwi Games on X was the one that asked about must-haves in first aid kits. And then you had something else beyond that you were going to say.
Well, the other one that was sort of related to this was what car bag or survival essentials should you always have nearby?
Okay.
So we're that too.
Yeah, we're covering a lot of this stuff. So to answer Kiwi Games must have in first aid kits. So I bought one of those big Amazon first aid kits. Comes in a huge red bag. It had an oxygen tank in there. It's got like tubing and bandages and blah, 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 and shears and all this kind of stuff. I bought it to take on scout campouts back in the day. So I'm like, yeah, we want to have our big first aid bag. And I've probably used like 4 things out of it. In comparison, last year, Mother's Day. So a year ago, Mother's Day, I went to Costco and I was like, I'm going to buy a year's supply of everything from the Costco pharmacy area that we would need. So I got ibuprofen and Tylenol and Excedrin and Pepto-Bismol and Tums and magnesium and vitamin C and let's see, all the stuff like burn cream, just all this stuff. And I kid you not, it was in one of the big Costco boxes. I had that sucker jam packed, and it included Band-Aids. They sell these big boxes of Band-Aids. It's like assorted Band-Aids. And I got like 5 of those and brought that home. We put it in storage, and I kid you not, here we are a year later, all the Band-Aids are gone, like completely wiped out. We've got 5 kids at home. We live on a farm, bumps and bruises, plus kids use them as stickers sometimes. Like those are all gone. So I guess what I'm getting at is look at the things you use the most in your medicine cabinet and go buy a year's supply of those things. And then as you are going out, like I did on a trip or putting together your car kit, you can pull from that to make your smaller stuff. I would recommend do not go on Amazon and buy a pre-made kit because it's going to be like 95% gauze and 5% stuff that you'll actually use. So that's how I would start it. In fact, we've talked here at Dwelt on our Dwelt meetings, like, let's put together a kit that actually we would use, that's not just filled with a bunch of fluff. So we're working with some people to get that done. We think we might be able to do that. Same thing with the car kit. So we've already talked about shoes for walking, a hat for cover, jacket, tarp. I keep a blanket in every single one of my cars. You can get blankets on sale during Christmas time because people give blankets as gifts. You can get them then or right after Christmas. They'll go on sale, and just a blanket. In fact, we used one of our car blankets last night. We went out to get some street tacos, and my wife was cold, and I pulled out the car blanket and was like, "Here you go, wrap up." And she did. It was awesome. I always carry a strap of some sort in my car, and that's because I live out in the middle of nowhere, and so inevitably I'll be driving down the road and somebody's plowed into the snow off the side of the road, and so I pull over and pull them out. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Lighter, or a handful of lighters, your first aid kit. You mentioned a tourniquet, Chris. I buy schmogs. They're those like Palestinian looking covers or whatever, Jordanian looking covers that people wear. It's like a 3 foot by 3 foot bandana. And you can use those for all sorts of stuff. You can use them for shade. You can use them for cooling towels. But you can also use them as part of your tourniquet. Trying to think what else I keep in there. Gloves. I always have a pair of gloves on me, and I pull those out and use them more often than not. And it works great in any situation. Like, you got to change a tire, sweet. Throw your blanket on the ground. You can lay on the blanket if you need to get under your car for something. Pull out your gloves. You got your gloves. You can put your hat on so you're shaded. Like, it's just practical and common sense.
Perfect.
This is a sweet list. Just so everyone knows, I took notes and wrote it all out, and we'll seriously do everything we can to try to come up with some sort of kit with all this stuff, because it would be super sweet.
Yeah, that's true. I also keep a water filter with me in the car as well, and so you've got that. And then I'll go back to the Dave Canterbury, what is it, 10 C's of survival. Go through that. It's like cordage, container, cutting tool, like all that kind of stuff. Great way to approach it. We got another question here. This is from B Mariner. His question was SHTF comms, and that's all he said. So SHTF stands for stuff hits the fan. When stuff hits the fan, how are you going to communicate? So the best way, and we've already talked about this, the best way to communicate is to have a plan before you can't communicate. So we talked about, my family had a plan for where do we meet if something goes wrong in the house? Where do we meet if something goes wrong in the neighborhood? Where do we meet if something goes wrong in our area? And so we have those in place. So that way, if something does happen, you actually don't need to communicate because everybody knows where to go and meet up. So super important to have that in place. Right now, we are working on LoRa Mesh Network. You can look it up, LoRa. It's open source hardware and software. So you can buy little LoRa kits and assemble it yourself. But it allows you to set up your own mesh network. And so in my area with my neighbors, we're setting up our own LoRa network. It's secure mesh networking where you can use your phone. You can buy a little or build a little LoRa device, but it basically allows you to text each other on your own little network. And it's super cheap. Like, you can build a LoRa device for like $18 or $12 or something like that. And it's kind of the new thing. I did buy some Gotenna mesh network devices. I have like a dozen of them, which was kind of the LoRa tech, but it was proprietary and had an app. The app is no longer authorized in the Google or the Apple App Store. And so it doesn't really make sense to get those unless you and all your family are on Android. But what ended up happening is the mesh network became such a valuable tool that GoTenna has now contracted with the U.S. military. And so they can show up anywhere and all be on their own private mesh network without using cell towers or giving away their location and stuff like that. So look into LoRa for mesh networking. I have ham radios. You can get ham radios and get certified in that. It's not everybody's favorite thing to do. So that's one way to do it. If you're part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and you have a local ward or branch, encourage your ward or branch to put together a communications plan where, I mean, in one of my wards, we had the 12 and 13-year-old boys were assigned as communication runners. It was a very small geographic ward. And so we said, hey, if anything happens, everybody meet at this location, and then we'll disseminate messages there, and you can just run and give the message. And so, we had that in place as a backup. And then last but not least is the little Motorola Talkabout or regular walkie-talkies, the GMRS radios. I use those hunting with my family every year, and you can cover a couple of miles distance with those, and they work really, really well. So, and then last but not least would be a radio that you can turn on and listen to stuff. And if you keep a radio in a Faraday bag with some batteries, you'll be able to at least turn it on, tune into the different stations, and see if anybody's broadcasting any updates that way. So there's kind of a list of all of your options on communications.
Awesome. I have a couple more prepping related questions. Okay. And then I have some news related questions that can get us into my stuff. So
nice.
Let's do it. One question was, has your approach to prepping changed over the last 4 years? And if so, how?
Oh yeah. Great question. Mine has definitely, because just like anything, any skill that you develop, you can improve over time. And so we kind of joked about this on our team call yesterday, where Ozark Trail might not cut it. So Ozark Trail is the outdoor brand at Walmart. And I think the smart thing to do is to go get Ozark Trail stuff. Get an Ozark Trail tarp, get an Ozark Trail backpack. If you don't have the money, go get that. And I promise you, as you get that and you get all set up, you'll feel much more secure, but then you'll start looking at, okay, what's the next level up? What's going to be a little bit more durable, more permanent, maybe lighter weight, more effective. But what's great is starting out with Ozark Trail stuff is you get to quickly identify what you'll use and what you won't use. And so you get to say, oh, this container's too small, or this water filter is garbage, or, this multi-tool hurts my hand. And so then what you need to upgrade and what you don't. And then we actually have Brad, who was on the call last time. He's put together what he calls inch bags, an inch bag list. Inch stands for I am never coming home. And it's his kit that he's put together for, if things go really bad and you have to walk out of there, grab your inch bag. And it's ultra lightweight. It's, the latest materials for insulation value. So, you're spending thousands of dollars for 1 inch bag, but it's a process, right? You start small and work your way up. The way that my prepping has evolved is I did the same thing. Like I went out, Beth and I went to Costco and bought some flour and some sugar, and we put it in buckets. Oh, and some beans. And we're like, if we have beans, flour, and rice, beans, flour, rice, and some sugar, we can survive. And so we did that first. And then we got some freeze-dried food. And then we stored up all the little staples. Like we have ketchups and we have, peanut butter, stuff like that. But then after a while of doing that, we realized we can't store up all the food that we need. So we need to start growing food. And so we got into gardening, and we've had beef for years and years as a business, but we got into chickens, and then we got goats, and now we have goat's milk. And so it's definitely a process. I've met with some people who were down looking at the Dwelt location yesterday, And I'm like, so what made you start thinking about this? And their answer was, well, we got some chickens. And there's kind of a meme or a joke that's like, if you want to become an extremist, get chickens, because you quickly realize, wait a minute, I can get this really good food that's like 10 times better than grocery store food. And I mean, it's not free, but it's satisfying to get your own eggs, and then it just kind of spirals up from there. Same thing with gardening. You start growing stuff and you're like, wait, I get free tomatoes, unlimited free tomatoes. I'm going to keep doing this. So that's where I'm at now, where we're looking at how do we produce enough food for everybody, number one. And then now, as you know, with Dwelt, how do we provide places of refuge for everyone? And that's even an evolution. We started out thinking of one location. And now, I mean, I've got someone in Australia who sees the vision and is like, we want Dwelt locations in Australia. And so even that is expanding.
That leads into the next question perfectly.
All right.
What's the easiest livestock to get started with?
I'd say chickens. Chickens are super easy. Although I'll just throw this out there. We got our first milk goat, and turns out she's like the orneriest goat that there ever was. But we got this goat and we started milking her, and we realized that goats are kind of like dogs. Like you can train them, you call them and they come. They like flop their ears around and pounce around, and they're super fun and entertaining. And you can pet them and they love to be petted. And I was like, why doesn't everybody have a goat? Like we went to Africa and every household that could afford a goat had a goat or two. I'm like, are we all fans of dogs because they tell us to be fans of dogs? Because dogs are great. I've got like 6 of them here at the farm. But they don't produce food. So a goat, man, if you have a backyard and can sneak a goat in there under your city's ordinances or whatever, you don't have to clean up their poop because they just poop little pellets for the most part. They eat grass. So we have an area on our property that just weeds grow like crazy. It's like, we call it our junkyard, and it's always just a mess. And so we let the goats out there, and we don't have to weed whack the weeds or mow the area. They just eat it all down. It's awesome. So I don't know, goats, and you don't have to build a chicken coop. Like goats are pretty easy. So I'd say either chickens or goats. I know there's probably
get off mute.
Yeah, there's probably some people out there that are like, I want to start with a horse, and that's great. But with the other thing with goats is you don't need a big, huge livestock trailer. You can literally put them in a big dog kennel and throw them in the back of your SUV and drive with them, like no problem. Feeding goats, you don't have to buy special food for goats. Now, if you're milking, we buy a special food so that the milk is the best milk on the planet. Right, Chris? But
it is. Yeah.
But I mean, even with chickens, you got to buy feed. With goats, you don't really need to buy feed. They go out and they eat the lawn. It's awesome.
I know Joel Salatin is all about everybody having chickens in their backyard, but I'm going to be talking to him and getting the goat thing going. Chickens and goats for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a milk goat, you do have to milk it once or twice a day, most of the year. But for me, that's translated into, and for my wife especially, we get to go milk, because you go out and you milk, and then you're like out in the field enjoying the sunset, and it's just like this beautiful, serene experience. We love it.
All right. Another question is, who is actually running things? I'm just going to use this to shill our new show on Dwelt and say, watch The Watchmen. I keep saying The Watchmen. Leland was very clear. It's Watchmen. Go watch
Watchmen. Go watch Watchmen.
It's our new show on Dwelt. It's me and Leland Tanner. That's pretty much what it's about, right?
Yeah, for sure. And to simplify that, who's really in charge? It's good versus evil, right? It's Christ versus Satan, just like in the very beginning. And Satan was cast down to this world with a third of the hosts of heaven, because he couldn't remain in the Father's presence. Nothing unworthy can remain there. So he was cast down to this world, and we are given the opportunity to be here And if we choose to follow Christ, we are greatly blessed and in so many ways. And we are able to become freer of the power of Satan in our lives. So yes, there are Luciferian organizations. Yes, there's a hierarchy, I believe. Yes, that hierarchy or those members are embedded in every facet of our lives, from government to entertainment to economics, business, education, healthcare, food supply. They are everywhere. There have been multiple prophets that have said now is the time where Satan has been let loose upon the land. And so I was talking yesterday, I was chatting back and forth with, what's his name on X? Awakened Saint. Let's see, Awakened Day Saint. So he and I were chatting back and forth. We were DMing on some stuff, and he kind of asked a similar question, like who's running things and, what's going to happen with Biden and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, the chief of staff that Biden has, I think he's actually running the show right now. And so I'm trying to look up his name real quick. He was put in February of 2023. And I think that coincides pretty well with when Biden became incapable of actually doing anything. Let me look it up real quick.
Is it Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff. What's his last name?
Jeff Zients or something?
Yeah, Jeff Zients, I think.
Yeah.
Since February 8th, 2023. There was a James O'Keefe expose where the guy said, number 2 is not Kamala Harris, or Kamala. I don't know how you say her name. It's Jeff. And so anyway, I think they're embedded.
She doesn't know how to say her name either. It's okay.
That's true. I think they're embedded everywhere. And so that's why we have to be very careful about being deceived. And watch Watchmen. Watch the Watchmen podcast.
2 more questions and we're through all the questions.
Okay.
This one, I'm assuming it was directed to you, Mitch. So I hope you know what they're talking about. Is the big earthquake coming this year in Utah?
Yeah. So the person that asked that question, let's see, she did 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 different questions. I think we've addressed a couple of them, but one of our really good friends, someone we love and respect. There are rumors in the rumor mill that some of the dreamers that wrote some of the books or were featured in some of the books are saying this year is the year for the big Utah earthquake. And dude, I don't know, but I will say
nothing ever happens.
I will say this. If the dreamers are saying it's going to happen, it probably won't happen. Because, I mean, so many of those people have followed weird spirits that tell them to predict this or that or the other thing. And what do those weird spirits do every time? They abandon people. It's like a humiliation ritual. Like, hey, I'm going to get this person to think they know. I'm going to tell them that they know, and then I'm going to have them proclaim it to the world, and then it's not going to happen. And I'm going to humiliate them. And I'm going to humiliate everybody that believed in them. And that's not all the case all the time, but so far it's like the record stands that it's like 100%.
I think it's even darker than that.
Okay, let's hear it.
Man, we're going to go down.
Chris is like, Mitch, you need to be thinking weirder.
Yeah.
Yeah, think weirder. Okay. I was listening to a podcast. They were talking about, I think I posted something about this idea, in that there's this whole ayahuasca thing that all the tech guys go and do, where you drink the ayahuasca. It's DMT. I don't know how much you guys want to know. DMT lasts like, I don't know, a few minutes if you take it in its normal form.
Yeah.
If you drink it in this ayahuasca stuff that these shamans in South America make, there's something in the plants that allows it to last like 8 to 12 hours. So these guys go down and they drink it.
Oh, is this the laser thing? The laser matrix? No? Okay, keep going.
I don't know.
Okay.
Who knows what people see? I've never done it. I can't tell you what they see.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right.
The shamans say, because the plant that they mix together to make this happen are like found on opposite sides of the jungle, and just these random plants. And so when the Westerners show up, the Westerners are like, how in the world did you figure out to mix these plants together? And the shamans say, well, the plants told us. The plants told us what to do. And I posted, the plants didn't tell you anything. It was demons telling you what to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretending to be the plants, but it was all demonic. So anyways, this show is going on about these experiences people have where they hear voices or something in the jungle, or that claims that it's like a natural thing, and it's leading them down these interesting paths. One lady they talked about goes missing for like a week. They finally find her, and when they find her, she's like on the verge of death, and she's covered in bug bites, and she's like, well, the voice told me that I should let the bugs bite me because I needed to suffer in order to be enlightened. And there's like this whole idea that suffering is going to lead to enlightenment. And I think part of it is these I mean, it's demonic. All this stuff is demonic, and they are mad that you have a body and they don't, and they want you to suffer. I think at the core of it, that's what it is. They're trying to get you to suffer. And so they lead people away, not even just to trick them, but to make them suffer.
Yeah, I believe that. That's at the core of the humiliation ritual. And, you know, I think one illustration of that in pop culture is Pirates of the Caribbean. Remember the pirates steal the gold and then they lose their sense. And so, you know, Barbossa like is eating the apple and he's like, this just tastes like ash in my mouth. And imagine you're an unembodied spirit and you can see all of these people having experiences and feeling things, and you're going to get some funky, weird high from watching them experience these things. And so you say, you know, let the bugs bite you because you want to imagine what it feels like to do something. I mean, when Barbossa watches the girl, I can't remember what her name is, eat, he's just like, oh, that looks so good. And yeah, freakishly weird stuff.
Yeah, it is. And they point out in the show, anytime you start to hear these philosophies or stories of like, close your eyes and envision a light taking you over, that whole like, it's kind of like Eastern philosophy type stuff. It's like it always ends in suffering and
it's true,
just demonic sadness. So anyways,
so the laser thing, I'll just put this out there. Some guys have tested this out, and they'll take DMT, and then if they shine like a red laser on the wall, a laser line, and then focus on the laser line, they say they can see code. And so they've tested it out with people who have never heard this theory, and they give them DMT and they shine the laser line and they say, focus on it. What do you see? And everybody sees the same thing. And they're like, oh, that's proof that we live in a matrix. And I think, no, that's just proof that you're an idiot doing drugs. Like
it's proof that something is telling you something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe you should be careful about what that something is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I was going to make a commentary about drug use, but it's just sad that anybody gets involved in that. Okay. So should I go through some of the other questions that this person asked?
I think I have one of them is my last one I was saving. So I got the China one.
All right.
If there's others you want to address, we can do that first, but
no, go ahead. What's the China one?
Will China attack Taiwan?
So, you get a bunch of these fake Twitter things that push stuff out, and they're like, you know, China says internally that they're going to attack Taiwan on June 1st. And the first comment that ratioed everybody was, publish when you're going to attack, as a quote. And then it said Sun Tzu, Art of War. Like, no nation does that, right? Hey guys, we're going to attack you. We're going to attack you. Watch
unless
out.
You're Israel and Iran, apparently.
Yeah. Well, that was a show. And so I think it's highly unlikely. Now, China did just complete a drill where they put ships all around Taiwan, and people are saying, you know, this is a dry run. This is a practice run. I don't know enough about it to know if they do that every month or if, you know, this is a regular thing that they do, or if the person reporting it just pointed a bunch of Chinese container ships and said, see, they've surrounded Taiwan. So I don't know enough about this. I will say this though. We're not promised that troubles will avoid us because we're trying to follow Christ. In fact, Christ says, my yoke is light and my burden is easy, which if you look at an ox that is wearing a yoke, it is enslaved essentially at that point. So he's like, yeah, you're going to have things put upon you, but my yoke is easy. So you're going to have strength, which goes along with our come follow me lesson this week, where the people of Alma were taken over by a group of Lamanites and they were oppressed severely, and they prayed and had faith, and their burdens were made light, and they were able to have joy in spite of their burdens because of their faith in Jesus Christ. And as we look at the number of temples that have been built and where they are going, there will be temples in China. And I think Taiwan's got a temple, right? And so not that we will always be immune from trouble, but for now, the work goes on. And I actually anticipate that as things get scarier, as things get more difficult, more and more people will turn to Christ. We've already talked about Russell Brand and Kat Von Dutch and that Nala girl, and just so many people are turning to Christ and exercising their faith and growing in their faith, and it's producing better results, tremendous results worldwide. So will China attack Taiwan? I don't think it's imminent. Like, it doesn't make any sense for them to do that at this point.
I don't think so either. A couple of things. I have a friend who has lived in Taiwan, I don't know, like 10 years now, probably. And he also served his mission in Taiwan. So he's pretty familiar with the country and the culture at this point. He speaks the language. Mm-hmm. He's like 6'7" and white, so he really stands out. but he loves it there. And anytime any of these like news things break here of like China's running these drills or whatever, I'll message him and I'll be like, dude, did you see this? Are you getting worried? And he's like, every single time he's like, this happens like every day. Nobody here cares. Like, nobody here is worried about it. No one here thinks anything's ever going to happen with China. Like, it's just not a thing. So there's a perspective from Taiwan. I will say China will probably at some point make a move, but I've heard a lot of people that I really trust and believe that they know what they're talking about in some of these military conflicts. And they're always pointing out that Russia and China seem to want, well, maybe want isn't the right word, but they're preparing for war with the West. And that Russia right now is waiting for China to be ready, and China's just not ready yet. That their estimation is it's like another 5 years until China is ready for that kind of conflict. And going into Taiwan is very likely going to cause war with the West because we need all of the computer stuff that Taiwan is making. And so it's a little different than Ukraine because like we don't, other than to hide our politicians' corruption, we don't really have use for Ukraine. And Taiwan actually makes stuff we need. So I don't imagine they will invade Taiwan in the near future until they are like absolutely ready for war.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. I think you're dead on with all of that. There are some weird things going on in China, and you know, anybody that's into demographics will say China is about to collapse because you have this massive generation with the baby boomers who are aging. They're out of the workforce. They're putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the social economic system there. And then you've got the one child policy that produced no women or aborted baby girls. And so you've got all of these men that can't find wives. There are no wives. You've got this implosion of the construction industry that was corrupt, where You'd have someone who's the brother of a government official. The government official would say, we need to build a new city. They would build an entire new city with no one to populate it because nobody's having kids because they only have men. And so you've got all of these strange dynamics happening in China. And the idea that they're going to, hurry and assemble and start off a world war, it just doesn't seem super plausible. Now, they are building ships at like 10 times the rate that the US is in terms of military ships. And so people who are watching the area are really interested to see what's going on there. Like, why are they building all these ships? Well, if you have a bunch of men and no wives, you've got to get those men somewhere to get the wives, or you've got to get wives to the men. And so, there's some concerns about that. But China is actually mentioned in the book of Isaiah. I think we've talked about this before. Let me pull up my screen and I'll share this. And this goes kind of to, one of the questions that was asked about 1 Nephi 21, which is Isaiah 49. And we can click back and forth between those two and see them side by side. But there's the conversation that's happening here is between the Lord and his servant Israel. And the servant says, so we're in 1 Nephi 21, 4, which is also Isaiah 49, 4, I believe. The servant Israel says, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Surely my judgment is with the Lord and my work is with my God. And what it's talking about is Israel is trying to gather itself together. And it's like, we can't do it. It's not working. It says right here in verse 5, he says, Israel is saying, the Lord that formed me in the womb, that I should be his servant to bring Jacob again to him, but Israel's not gathered. And then the Lord goes back and says, don't worry, I will gather Israel for you. So verse 7, thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, his Holy One, kings shall see and arise, princes shall also worship because of the Lord that is faithful. Thus saith the Lord, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, O isles of the sea, and in a day of salvation have I helped thee, and I will preserve thee and give thee my servant for a covenant for the people, to establish the earth, to cause to inherit desolate heritages. And then he goes on to say he will pull them together. He'll guide them by springs of water, that the mountains will fall down so that the people can pass through and be gathered together. And he says in verse 12, and I love this because it's poetic, and then, O house of Israel, behold, these shall come from far. So these scattered people of Israel shall come from far, and lo, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those who are in the east shall be established. So what is this place, Sinim? Many scholars believe this is China, the emperor, one of the first emperors of China that kind of brought the empire together was Xin or Shen, which can also be written as Sin. And so in academia, when we talk about Sino-American relations, we're talking about Chinese-America relations. And so, and this is concurrent with Isaiah. Like Isaiah plausibly knew that China was a land that existed. And so in this language, the Lord is saying, we'll gather them out from the north, we'll gather them out from the west, we'll gather them from China. Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those who are in the east shall be established, which China is in the east. And he's saying that, Zion will be at that point struggling and saying, the Lord has forsaken me, my Lord's forgotten me, I'm all by myself. And the Lord's like, no, I'm going to bring them. I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. And he says, lift up thine eyes round about in verse 18, all these gather themselves together, and they shall come to thee, and shall clothe thee with them all as with an ornament, and bind them on even as a bride. And thy waste places and thy desolate places, the land of thy destruction, shall even be too narrow. So there's going to be so many people coming that the land will be too narrow. And the children whom thou shalt have will say, the place is too straight for me. Give me a place that I may dwell. There's not enough room for all these people that will gather together. And then, of course, the verse that we're familiar with and we hear over and over again, verse 23, and kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face towards the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. And he says that he will fight our battles, fight against those that fight against us, that he will feed them and oppress them with their own flesh. And everyone will know that the Lord is God. And so I look at this, that is about this great gathering of Israel that's happening now, but will be even more amplified in coming days. And so as we look at, what's going to happen with China, I don't know, but I do know based on the scriptures that there will be a massive conversion to Christ and that they will be gathered in. And the gathering place, I believe, is here in the Western US. And we will have so many come to this continent to live under the banner of Christ that there won't even be enough room. And you think about, the deserts of the West or the plains, those will all be filled up. There will be so many people that come under the banner of Christ that there won't even be room for them. And if you go back, the same person asked about 1 Nephi chapter 14, where it talks about there will be this little flock of believers in this great world of conspiracy, and the world will fight against them and fail, and the believers will come forth triumphant, even though they be a few. So that's just a few verses or a few chapters before this. And so it's like, even as the world rises up against the believers will be sustained and will be able to overcome. And then the gathering will happen, and we'll have millions or billions of people come to the banner of Christ and establish Zion here.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be rad.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so let me go on a little bit more of a autistic rant about this.
Okay, go for it.
So right back there in those verses, let me scroll up to, I know I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but verse 13, where it says, sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those who are in the east shall be established. For those of you who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that may sound familiar to you. In our Come Follow Me lesson last week, we read about Abinadi and the wicked priests of King Noah. And what did the wicked priests of King Noah asked about a scripture interpretation? They're like, hey, what does this scripture mean? And that scripture was out of Isaiah 52. So just a couple of chapters after what we just read. And it says, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of them who go forth and proclaim peace, right? Something to that effect. And so they ask Abinadi about that. And he's like, bro, you want me to translate the scriptures? You're the high priests. Like, come on, are you righteous high priests or are you not? That actually links. So that scripture links to here to Isaiah 49. But it also links to when Christ visited the Nephites. So if you go to 3 Nephi chapter 16, let me see if I can get there real quick and I'll share my screen. I should have had it open for everyone. So 3 Nephi chapter 16, the Lord comes and he teaches the people, and I'm not going to do this justice because I'm just kind of skimming over it. Here we go. Let me share this. You'll appreciate this, Chris. Okay, so we're in 3 Nephi 16. And well, we start off this and he's teaching the people. And you remember at the end of this chapter, he's like, I can tell you're tired. I can tell you're not getting it. Go home. And we'll meet again and I'll teach you more about this. But he's prophesying about what happens in the last days. So if you want to know what happens in the last days, go read through this. And he's talking about the people here in the Americas because he mentions it multiple times. He's like, here's what's going to happen to your descendants. Here's what's going to happen to your descendants. Here's what's going to happen to your descendants. And so he gets into the words of the prophet Isaiah here in verse 17. So 3 Nephi 16, 17. And he's saying all these things will happen. And he says, and then the words of the prophet Isaiah shall be fulfilled, which say, thy watchmen lift up the voice, with the voice together shall they sing, for they shall see eye to eye when the Lord shall bring again Zion. break forth into joy, sing together, ye waste places of Jerusalem, for the Lord hath comforted his people, he hath redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord hath made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see thy salvation. And if we look at the reference here, that takes us to 3 Nephi 20. So he's teaching the people. And then in chapter 17, he's like, you guys are too tired. You're not getting it. Go home. I'll teach you later. And then he leaves and they all get rest, and he institutes the sacrament. He heals people. He blesses the children, and he goes back into teaching. And in 3 Nephi chapter 20 and 21, he brings back this thing of Isaiah. He's like, so all of this stuff will happen. Again, read these and it'll tell you this is what's going to happen in the last days on this continent. And then he says, ye remember that I spake unto you. So this is 3 Nephi 20:11. You remember that I spake unto you and said that when the words of Isaiah should be fulfilled, behold, they're written, you have them before you, therefore search them. Verily I say unto you that when they shall be fulfilled, then is the fulfilling of the covenant which the Father hath made unto his people, O house of Israel. And then he goes on to talk about the blessings of the covenant. And he talks about protecting his people and building them up and gathering to get them together, and that they, the descendants of these people, plus the believing Gentiles, which Gentiles translates to non-believers, right? That they will be established in the land and build up the new Jerusalem. The powers of heaven will be in the midst of the people. And he goes on to talk about how beautiful upon the feet are the people. And he re-quotes, then shall their watchmen lift up their voice. So this is the stuff we just read from Isaiah 52. The watchmen will lift up their voice, and with the voice together shall they sing, for they shall see eye to eye, and they will sing, and Jerusalem will be redeemed and put on its beautiful garments, its covenants again, and be redeemed. And then he goes in the next chapter, 21, and he says it again. He reviews all of this again, and he says, this is going to happen to the remnant of your seed. And if the Gentiles dwindle in unbelief, they'll be cursed. I mean, he just walks through all of this, and he talks about the remnant, right? And my people who are a remnant of Jacob. So this is 3 Nephi 21:12. And my people who are a remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, yea, in the midst of them as a lion among the beasts of the forest, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who, if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can be delivered. Basically saying, you're indestructible if you follow me. And then he quotes Micah chapter 5, where he says he'll cut off the horses, he'll destroy the chariots, he'll destroy the cities, he'll destroy the strongholds, the witchcrafts, the graven images, the groves, the lyings, the deceivings, and he will establish Jacob, Israel, and build up the new Jerusalem, and the work of the Father will happen. So we're in verse 26. Yea, verily I say unto you, at that day shall the work of the Father commence among all the dispersed of my people, yea, even the tribes which have been lost, which the Father hath led away out of Jerusalem, and they will be established. So all of this, we talk about, how focused we are on the doom and the gloom, but then the prophets are saying great miracles will also be wrought in these last days. And if you review these chapters, that's what they're talking about, that the gathering will happen, that the covenants will be restored, that the cities will be rebuilt, and that we will be able to have the Savior living among us. And so as you go through these things, it's when the wicked priests of King Noah are telling Abinadi, hey, what does this mean? It's like, this means some pretty amazing stuff in the last days. It's not for you, but in the last days, all of this stuff is going to happen, and the Lord will prepare a way. There you've got 3 Nephi 21:27, the Father to prepare a way whereby they may come to me. 28, the Father among all nations in preparing a way whereby his people will be gathered home. We are going to have a tremendous gathering from everywhere. And so, I could go on and on about this even more than I have. This is just kind of a high level overview, but when we talk about having places of refuge or places of producing food, we're going to have to feed millions of people, tens of millions of people. And so that's what I'm focused on, is how do we get to a place where we can do that without falling into destruction in the cities or succumbing to Babylon and her, seductions and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad you went on your. I'm glad you went down the rabbit hole.
I do need to compile all of that. I mean, we didn't really get to talk about 3rd Nephi chapter 6 and 7 and stuff like that. But even in there, well, how about we hop into that? You guys cool if we hop into that?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. We're about a week away from what the world calls Pride Month, right? And when I hear that, I think the opposite of what the world thinks. Like, pride is not a good thing, generally, like the word and the sentiment. And so, maybe while I look up these scriptures, you guys can give us a quick synopsis of the pride cycle that we see over and over again in the Book of Mormon.
You want to do it, Dan, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I'm thinking about it, and I definitely have read it many times. And
yeah, okay, I can do it. The pride cycle is a cycle from the Book of Mormon that just continually happens and happens throughout the scriptures. And so usually it's because a group of people, they're righteous, their righteousness leads to prosperity, the prosperity leads to pride, and as part of that, wickedness. And then the pride and wickedness leads to destruction and suffering. And the destruction and suffering leads them to become humble again and repent, which makes them righteous, which then makes them prosperous, which then makes them prideful and wicked. And it just continues. It continues
over and over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, there are academics that point that out with, there's a book called The Fourth Turning, or The Four Turnings, or something like that, where it's that same thing where strong men make great times make weak men make difficult times.
I'm so glad you said that,
make strong men.
I have when you're done here, I have some Kali Yuga. I don't know how to say it. Kali Yuga stuff.
Oh, Caligula?
No. The Yugas.
I don't know what you're talking about, but okay.
I'm pretty sure it's all the fourth turning stuff. Yeah, we'll get into it. It's okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So similar to the fourth turning, right? It's like pride begets the fall, right? So Awakened Day Saint asked my opinion on, you've got this time in the Book of Mormon in 3rd Nephi where, starting in chapter 4, there's a siege that is laid against the people by this conspiracy. So the conspiracy, they call them the Gadianton robbers. They basically surround the people and lay siege upon them. And they put them in this situation where the people store up 7 years worth of supplies, and they're laid siege upon. And the Gadianton robbers are around them, like cutting off supply chains, making sure that they're running out of food. And so I've got some notes. I'm going to go kind of fast through this. I'll put it into a bigger presentation and share at some other time. But 3rd Nephi 4:16. And for those of you that are watching, I'm sharing my screen right now, so you can take a look at that. Or just listening, you might want to watch. So 3rd Nephi 4:16, 21st year, they lost their outward privileges. And in 2020, we lost our outward privileges. Temples closed, missionaries came home, churches closed. And so if we start the timer right there, and this comes, I think Morgan Philpott talks a lot about this. Many others have documented this. I went through it myself because I was like, I need to see what's going on here. And so this was back in January. I was putting together these notes. The siege didn't work. The people, the Nephites, had too many provisions stored up. And so the Gadianton robbers laid siege, and the people were like, we're fine. We can stay in here and eat all the food. In fact, the siege caused more issues for the Gadianton robbers than it did the Nephites. In 3rd Nephi 4:21, the Nephites were like, let's go out and attack them. The Gadianton robbers ran out of food because they were just slaughtering buffalo in the plains or whatever they were doing. And so the Nephites would go out and take out little parties. And eventually the siege failed and it had to collapse. And if we liken that to our day, we can look at the siege of COVID and say, temples stopped, churches stopped, missionaries stopped. We were laid siege upon. But members became more faithful. Missionary work kept working. They were like missionaries doing dances on TikTok and generating interest and mailing out copies of the Book of Mormon for people to read. People were doing family history work. Families were administering the ordinance of the sacrament in their own home, and neighbors were helping neighbors out with that didn't have that weren't able to do the sacrament in their own home. So while the Gadianton robbers laid siege against the Nephites and it failed, the modern day Gadianton robbers laid siege against the church of God and it failed. And so then the siege breaks up and you have a few years where, there were implications from the siege, like people had to go back to their own lands. People who were laying siege actually repented and said, we're sorry. Otherwise they were put to death. And so a few years passed by, and then there was this prosperity. And you could pause and read my personal notes on this. I put it to a timeline like, in 2025 and 2026, we might expect new laws and prosperity. But I think that probably is in terms of church prosperity. As things are challenging, more people will come to Christ than people who will suffer. And so peace happens for a while, but then something happens. In 3 Nephi 6:10, in the 29th year, which would equate to our 2028 if we were doing a timeline, which I don't believe in timelines, there began to be some disputing and pride and boasting because of wealth. And it's specifically against the rich are starting to persecute the poor. So I do some speculation in there. I'm probably wrong about all of that. But in 3 Nephi 6:13, this is where things go really bad. What ends up happening is the poor start fighting back. And that creates a schism in the church. And it's the words that are used in the scripture are the people return railing for railing. And that word to rail against is actually used to describe Sennacherib, the Assyrian in the Old Testament, that rails against the Lord. So that strikes me as odd, but that's when the church is broken up. And so once you get the rich persecuting the poor and the poor stand up for themselves, it destroys the church. And it's all because of pride. And from 3 Nephi 6:17, that's when people willingly rebel against God. Inspired men are sent forth to call them to repent, and they are tried and killed locally against the law. So the national law says you can't kill anybody, but the local judges are corrupt, and they say, yep, let's kill this person. So then the judges and lawyers get together in 3 Nephi 6:28, and they combine against all righteousness, and they combine against the people of the Lord, and they say, we want a king because we don't want to ever allow persecution again. And so the people turn away from God and decide they're going to legislate peace in the land. And the way they're going to legislate peace is by putting a monarch in place and martial law, essentially, that just runs everything. So nobody can have any choice. And that's when 3 Nephi 7:1, they kill the chief judge. That's the end of the government. And in verse 2, people are divided into tribes. And in 3 Nephi 7:7, there's a great contention in the land, so much so that all the righteous part of the people are destroyed and turn wicked. And so if we go to 3 Nephi 7:7, let's read that. 6:7, it says, and they did cause, so the secret combination did cause a great contention in the land, insomuch that the more righteous part of the people had nearly all become wicked. Yea, there were but few righteous men among them. And so it's like, even though the people were laid siege upon and, suffered so greatly, they led them into prosperity. They started to be prideful because of their prosperity and picking on the poor. Eventually, the poor get sick of it. There's probably more of them than the rich people. they stand up and fight against the rich people. That creates a great contention in the land. The government collapses, the church collapses, and the more part of the people that were righteous become wicked. And I will go into this more at a different date, but right now, this in our day, if we apply this to our lives, there's a scenario that's shaping up a lot like this that is quite parallel. So we had the siege with COVID. We had not prosperity in terms of like financial prosperity. I guess we're all doing okay. It's a little bit harder than normal, but people are starting, because of the difficult times, people are starting to turn to Christ. And now all of a sudden we have this strange open border thing that doesn't normally happen, that almost feels orchestrated. And people are pouring into the country, and they are not rich people. And you've got very rich people here who are like, we don't want these poor people coming in illegally. And it's creating this environment of stress and contention. And I think it's only going to escalate. I think rather than focusing our time worrying about Iran or Russia or China or whatever's going on in Europe or whatever's going on in Africa, those of us here in the United States need to look here and say, what's going on here with presidential elections, with economic developments, with impeachments going on, and talk of the 25th 25th amendmenting the president, and this immigration problem and disparity of wealth. We need to look into our own homes and our own hearts and say, how are we preparing to navigate all of these things? Are we going to grind the faces of the poor, like Isaiah says, or are we going to focus on developing enough resources that we can provide for anyone and everyone? And that's where I am. And it's a little bit of a Pollyanna attitude, but I'm like, as people are coming into my part of Utah, how can I help them? How can I provide them work? How can I provide them housing? How can I provide them food? And if I would do it to my own dwelt customers, would I do it to anybody else that comes? So that's a little rant about things that are to come. And there's some implications for Trump. There's implications for Biden. There's possibly implications for Barron Trump. There's a fun little rabbit hole that we can go down there. But I would say we need to look internally, go visit our neighbors, be kind to them, because we're in a very similar scenario to 3rd Nephi 4, 3rd Nephi 6, 3rd Nephi 7, and even up to 3rd Nephi 9. In 3rd Nephi 9, it talks about how there were only a few righteous people left, and they were the descendants of Lamanites. And so anyway, I think we need to look inward and get our hearts in the right place for what's coming and what's upon us right now.
Amen. I'm going to try and pull off a miracle.
All right.
In our last little bit here and tie that together with everything else on my list.
Sweet. Let's see it. Let's see what you got.
Okay. So apparently you're not familiar with the Yuga cycle. Does that sound familiar at all?
No.
All right.
Is that a motorcycle made in Yugoslavia?
Yeah. No, let me show you. I'll pull up a picture to show what it's like. Ignore the years. That stuff. I don't know if that matters. Okay. So the Yuga cycle is it's from Hindu. It's like Hindu cosmology. They believe that there's these cycles that happen in the history of Earth, and it explains all of the history and everything that's going on, and we go through these different cycles. So the first cycle is the Satya Yoga. That's the age of truth. It's when humanity is governed by the gods. It's like basically the ideal cycle.
It's like the millennial reign of Jesus Christ.
Yep. After that, you go into Treta. I'm probably butchering these. Treta Yoga. It's the second best. I mean, you're not governed by the gods, but it's still pretty good. Things are fine. Then you go into the Dwapar Yuga, and it's like the Bronze Age. That's kind of what it's known as. It's the Bronze Age. And then you I guess I should say descend into each of these. You descend into the Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is the worst of all of them, it's when people are essentially ruled by their natural urges and material desires, and virtue and morality and that kind of stuff declines, and they just care about material possessions. So it's pretty accepted, I think, in circles. Look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this, but everybody I've ever heard talk about it says we're in the Kali Yuga right now. That's the age we're in. The only debate is when the Kali Yuga ends. And when the Kali Yuga ends, it ends with destruction and death and fire and all of those things in an effort to I don't know if cleanse is the right word, to purify the people.
Okay. Yeah.
To prepare them to go back to the Satya Yuga where they're ruled by the gods. So it's exactly what you were saying before. Like, what is it? Weak times make strong men, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Bad times make strong men make good times make weak men. It's that cycle.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm listening to the show and they got this guy on who's like an expert on the yugas. As a side note, you guys should everyone listening should read or listen to the book War. I think it's War for Eternity or War of Eternities. It's a biography about Steve Bannon, and it's extremely interesting because Bannon is fully in on this Yuga thing. And he thinks we're like at the end of the Kali Yuga. And so it explains a lot of kind of that political philosophy. Anyways, so this guy is talking about the Kali Yuga and how we're at the end of it. And he's bringing in all of these like mathematical formulas and things that are happening. And he's predicting the Kali Yuga ends in March 2025. That we have like less than a year left until this era comes to an end and we enter the transitional era of destruction before the golden age. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
Why do all these timelines line up?
No, that's exactly what I was just going to say. I've said this before. I'm always looking for things that are like lining up that aren't related to each other. So I'm like, well, that sounds a lot like Second Coming prophecy and going into the millennium. It sounds exactly like it's the exact same thing.
Dude, that's wild.
Then they bring up on the next show, it's the same podcast, but the next episode, they're talking about this guy who has found like some pattern in the pyramids. It's actually pretty interesting because he's like hardcore scientist, like very, very traditional. He's an atheist, like doesn't believe in any of the spiritual stuff. And he is convinced that the poles are going to shift based on some of these things in the pyramids, and it's going to cause cataclysmic destruction, and that the Egyptians were trying to warn people because it had happened to them in the past. So there was this, he found evidence that there was this huge flood. Wonder where that came from. But
yeah,
this huge flood, there's evidence on the pyramids for it. I won't go into all of that, but after that happened, that the civilization at the time is like, well, we need to warn people that this happens, that there's these cycles and these cataclysms happen, and they set up this thing. And he's like, the poles are going to shift. The North Pole is going to move, and it's going to happen around like March 2025. So it's like completely disconnected from this other guy, and he's pointing at the same timeline.
Wow.
And so now I'm like, why is everything like coalescing into this to our time right now? And then you bring up like some of the things I had saved today where we're apparently going to have record-breaking hurricane.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, hurricane season this year.
The Atlantic Ocean is so hot, which is something this guy talked about. Actually, he said the ocean will get hot because the poles are shifting, and there's something right in that area, like the South Atlantic, that's connected to the pole shifting, that's warming from the inside out. And we seem to be seeing that happen. The ocean's super hot, so we're going to have this crazy storm season, like record-breaking hurricanes all year. We've already seen the storms happening in the Midwest, like the tornadoes and stuff. You have that. You have the bird flu stuff is still going on. Like you're getting human cases of it now, they say, if you want to believe that. You have Here, I'll share this one. This one's interesting. Somebody sent me this chart of solar activity compared to world events. I don't know if you guys saw this. So here we go. The top bar is the number of important historical events, and then the bottom is the number of sunspots, and it's like
Dang.
an exact match. Like
Wow.
exactly the same thing. And we know we're in like a solar maximum this year. Things are pretty crazy with the sun. We had the solar storm happen, and now scientists are saying like brace yourselves because it's going to be worse as the year goes on. Like that was a crazy storm, but it's going to get worse because the sun's activity is still increasing and still getting crazier. And so I look at all of these things, and it's again, everything just seems to be like coalescing into the apocalypse. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was a video that kind of went viral among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints this week. And it was a guy who's taken quotes from President Nelson and lined them up in sequence regarding the last days and the second coming and preparing for the second coming. And people have tweeted it all over the place and all over Facebook. And I'm getting it via DMs like, hey, did you see this? And it's really great. My wife and I actually went through that a few months ago and started lining them up. And yeah, the urgency at the message that the prophet has given is increasing and amplified over time. The more he talks about it, the more it's like, guys, it's upon us. It's here. The time is running out. Like now's the time. There's a sequence of events and a news story this week that really popped out to me. Let me share this because I think this might be the linchpin. So this is May 14th. I guess it came out last week or whatever, 2 weeks ago. Wisconsin High Court's ruling marks a dark day for religious freedom. The state argued that Catholic charities are not operated primarily for religious purposes because their activities are secular, and the court agreed. Basically, and you can look this up. It's on the Blaze, but it's everywhere else. There's a lawsuit between the state of Wisconsin Labor and Industry Review Commission and the Catholic Charities. And they're basically saying all the work that you do on the charity side is not religious, it's secular. And you can't separate the religious from the secular. Therefore, it's plausible that religious donations should be considered as secular donations and should not be tax exempt. I mean, that's the short of it, and doesn't doesn't cover it all. But the idea is, if there is an exemption to religious, if they remove the tax exemption of religious donations, what will that do to churches? I think we've talked about this before. Nearly all churches will go out of business very, very quickly because so many people donate to offset their tax burden, right? So if you've donated $10,000 to a charity, you get to say, I'm going to decrement that from the money that I took as income. And so I'm going to deduct that, and that way I don't need to pay as much on taxes. And so it's either goes to the government or goes to a church. Well, here we have an instance where the government is saying not all donations to churches should be tax exempt. And if they make that a law at the federal level or a decision at the federal level, we will have churches going out of business overnight. On top of this, I just read recently, there is a private equity firm that decided to fund basically the franchising, the privatization, the franchising of non-denominational churches. So this organization called ARC, A-R-C, is going through and buying up with private equity money churches and saying, hey, pastor, we'll give you this much money now. You give us money back over time out of your donations, and that will go back into our fund and be profitable. So they're investing in the profitability of churches. And that is going to come in under scrutiny as private equity firms continue to do bad stuff. Private equity firms destroyed all the Red Lobster restaurants, right? Red Lobster's going out of business because private equity bought them, borrowed money against their real estate and sucked all the value out of that. And now all of those locations are closing. And it's happening with homes, with neighborhoods, with restaurants. It's like private equity is failing more than it ever has. And I think as it's involved with churches, it's a perfect opportunity for the government to say donations are not tax exempt, which will destroy churches. What happens when all the churches go away? You will have millions of people, hundreds of millions of people who are looking for truth, but no longer have a place that they can go to. If that doesn't put us back into tribes, I don't know what does. I do believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will remain standing. And here in the Western Hemisphere, people will flock to the banner of Christ. And all over the world, people will flock to the banner of Christ. But we're in very interesting times as this decision that happened this month starts to cascade throughout everything, just like we saw with like same-sex marriage. It started, in one or two states, and then it cascaded until a national decision was made. I think we're in for something. And it's very plausible that this decision by next spring could affect all churches nationwide. And back in those scriptures that we read earlier in 3 Nephi 20 and 3 Nephi 21, Christ tells the people, when the Gentiles reject the fullness of the gospel, bad things are going to start happening. And so I would look to those types of things. The rejection of the gospel is going to be the trigger event for these calamities that are upon us. We talked about the earthquake earlier. Salt Lake Temple is being retrofitted to be earthquake proof, right? They put it on rollers and it's still not finished. Nobody knows when it's going to be finished. But there are rumors that it will be finished that the earthquake proofness part of it will be finished later this year. And then of course they have to, fill it back in and finish the interiors and open it up and rededicate it and stuff like that. But the earthquake component will be done later this year, supposedly. And yeah, once the Gentiles turn against the fullness of the gospel, which we've done in so many ways already, but I think there will be some pretty major, severe consequences that God will begin to preach his own sermons, and it's going to be rough. Now, there is one scripture that we talk about regularly that somebody asked me about this week, and it's in Doctrine and Covenants. Let me share this. And you guys have heard this. We've all heard it a million times. Doctrine and Covenants 112, 23. Verily I say unto you, darkness covereth the earth, and gross darkness the minds of the people, and all flesh has become corrupt before my face. That darkness is repeated multiple times in the book of Isaiah. I did a whole study on it, and I don't have concise notes on it, but there are multiple places in Isaiah where the Lord talks about darkness covering the land in the last days. Verse 24, behold, vengeance cometh speedily upon the inhabitants of the earth, a day of wrath, a day of burning, a day of desolation, a day of weeping, of mourning, and of lamentation. And as a whirlwind it shall come upon all the face of the earth, saith the Lord, and upon my house shall it begin, and from my house shall it go forth, saith the Lord. First among those among you, saith the Lord, who have professed to know my name and have not known me, and have blasphemed against me in the midst of my house, saith the Lord. I would say if we are going to have an earthquake that hits in the Wasatch Front, it will be in fulfillment of this scripture, that when we reject the fullness of the gospel by causing the prophets to go into hiding, killing the prophets, like in 3 Nephi chapter 6, that's when that comes. And so that's what I'm looking for, is when we turn away from the Lord and shut down religion nationwide, or shut down, cause prophets to go into hiding, that's when those things are coming. And I believe that's coming soon in the next few years, and it's going to suck. So plug for Dwelt. We need to have places of refuge that we can go to where we can produce our own stuff. And Chris, that kind of brings it full circle. There was a comment that you were saying earlier before this call about a podcaster or who was it? Jeff Prince or somebody like that was talking about doing parallel systems
it
or something
wasn't.
like that.
It was
Or
sort of
Eric Prince.
related to Eric Prince, but it was actually
Yeah.
someone on another call. We were on for a group call, and he was talking
Okay.
about building parallel systems.
And so, yeah, explain that real quick.
It's the idea that as things get worse and the government gets worse and society gets worse and it all decays morally, you need to be building parallel systems that uphold your values and the things that are important.
So what's an example of a parallel system?
Well, I mean, he's talking about, build communities, build businesses with your friends that uphold your values, build anything, gyms, grocery stores, like go do a dwelt community, like anything you can build parallel to what already exists, but that actually upholds your values and the things you care about, the better off you're going to be when the time comes that you need it.
Cool. I love it. Well, that's what we're trying to do. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, interestingly enough, one of the things on the other show I was listening to, and they're talking about how all of these things are like coalescing, and there's these massive time cycles, and they're like, well, you would think if these cycles are repeating themselves, and we know about it, that the people in charge have to know. So you would think they'd be doing something, and it's like, yeah, they are. Zuckerberg just spent billions of dollars building an underground bunker, and James Cameron has his yacht that's going to survive for years on the ocean. And I just saw an article in the Daily Mail this week about how millionaires everywhere are creating rooms that fire pepper spray out and ballistic grade walls to keep themselves safe. And it's like, they are preparing. They are. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah. The mice are abandoning ship. So we got to pay attention to that.
So you should probably prepare too. You should get yourself something safe to keep you safe.
I love it. All right. Dan, any last topics that we've got to hit before we drop off here?
Man, there's always so many, but I think we're good for now. I mean, I like having my ongoing list for all the episodes.
I love it.
Good.
There's we can end. I want to share this thread, and people should definitely check this out. Let me share my screen here real quick. This is a thread on X, produced or published by this guy Vandy. Let me zoom in and see if you can see this a little bit better. At Van Dyman _ that guy. Utah might have the most Utah might have the most. There you go. Utah might have the most hostile American geography outside of Alaska. And it goes through and talks about, the rugged terrain of Utah, that there's only one section of Utah that's inhabitable, really, or that was inhabitable, right through the smack dab middle of the state, north to south, protected by the Rockies. But then he pointed out the huge barrier that it was in traveling west, that people basically had to avoid Utah if they were going to get to California because of the mountains that were there, but also because of the massive desert by the Great Salt Lake. So this big, huge salt flats area that's just pure salt. Most of the year it's muddy and you can't traverse it. The Donner Party tried to traverse it. They took a shortcut through there and they got wagons stuck. And I've got friends who have gone out and seen the wagons that are still stuck in the salt after all these years. And it's virtually impassable. This is the route that they tried to take. And then beyond that, it's just straight desert, no water, no resources. It's just this Great Salt Lake desert, these high mountains south of there. And then if you look at the other corner of the state, the southeast corner of the state, you've got these deep canyons where even the Colorado River runs through and cuts these huge gorges. You can't get wagons through these canyons or back up the other side. And so it's completely impassable. There was one route, they called it Hole in the Rock, where they hauled wagons up and down, and it was this huge production in order to be able to cross the Colorado River. And so most people went on the Gila Trail, which went around all of that. And so for centuries, Utah has mostly remained uninhabited, and people have tried to avoid it. That's why the Mormon pioneers came here, because they're like, well, nobody wants that land. It's outside of the U.S. We've been driven out of the U.S. So we'll settle the inhabited area and we'll branch out from there. And that's what they did. And, I've grown up in Utah, spent a lot of time in the mountains and in the deserts. In a couple of weeks, I'm going out to the deserts with the young men in my congregation, and we are going to, rappel and do slot canyons and stuff like that. But Utah is definitely a destination and a place of safety. So as we talk about dwelt safe havens and the first location here in Utah, and expanding beyond just one location, this is the place to come. If you're looking for a place of refuge, if you're looking for natural security and natural defenses, Utah's the place. And the days are upon us where that's going to be necessary. People are going to want to come here just for safety purposes.
Shout out to the American Napoleon, Brigham Young, for seeing all of that and saying, yeah, that's exactly where I'm going.
Yeah, dude. Yep. Love it. That's awesome. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. Thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate you listening and watching and sharing this with your friends. Make sure you subscribe and like our stuff. Follow us on X. I've started posting on Facebook. We're publishing on YouTube, but stay with us. Help us build places of refuge and come join us. If you're interested in a dwelt location or in having a dwelt membership, go to dweltsafehavens.com, enter your email address. We'll be in touch. And we've got people coming, every other day at this point, 2 days in a row this week, people coming down to see the dwelt locations and sign up. We've got special promotions for the first 10 members here in Utah. And we've got some incentives for even making money off of other, making referrals to dwelt memberships. So anyway, check that all out, dweltsafehavens.com. Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
See ya.